On June 9th, 2016, Don Jr., Jared, and Paul Manafort met with a movie-worthy cast of dubious characters in Trump Tower after having been promised damaging information about Hillary Clinton. Don Jr., encouraged by Jared and Ivanka, was trying to impress his father that he had the stuff to rise in the campaign. When this meeting became public 13 months later, it would, for the Trump White House, encapsulate both the case against collusion with the Russians and the case for it. It was a case, or the lack of one, not of masterminds and subterfuge, but of senseless and benighted people so guileless and unconcerned that they enthusiastically colluded in plain sight. Walking into Trump Tower that June day were a well-connected lawyer from Moscow, who was a likely Russian agent, associates of the Azerbaijani-Russian oligarch Aras Agalarov, a U.S. music promoter who managed Agalarov's son, a Russian pop star, and a Russian government lobbyist in Washington. Their purpose in visiting the campaign headquarters of a presumptive major party nominee for President of the United States was to meet with 3 of the most highly placed people on the campaign. This meeting was preceded by an email chain addressed to multiple recipients inside the Trump campaign of almost joyful intent. The Russians were offering a dump of negative or even incriminating information about their opponent. Among the why and how theories of this imbecilic meeting, the Russians, in organized or freelance fashion, were trying to entrap the Trump campaign into a compromising relationship. The meeting was part of an already active cooperation on the part of the Trump campaign with the Russians to obtain and distribute damaging information about Hillary Clinton. And indeed, within days of the Don Jr. meeting, WikiLeaks announced that it had obtained Clinton emails. Less than a month later, it started to release them. The wide-eyed Trump campaign, largely still play-acting at running for president, and with no thought whatsoever of actually winning the election, was open to any and all entreaties and offers, because it had nothing to lose. Dopey Don Jr., Fredo, as Steve Bannon would dub him in one of his frequent Godfather borrowings, was simply trying to prove he was a player and a go-to guy. The meeting included the campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, and the campaign's most influential voice, Jared Kushner, because A, a high-level conspiracy was being coordinated, B, Manafort and Kushner, not taking the campaign very seriously and without a thought of any consequence here, were merely entertained by the possibility of dirty tricks. C, the 3 men were united in their plan to get rid of Lewandowski, with Don Jr. as the hatchet man, and as part of this unity, Manafort and Kushner need to show up at Don Jr.'s silly meeting. Whatever the reason for the meeting, no matter which of the above scenarios most accurately describes how this comical and alarming group came together, a year later, practically nobody doubted that Don Jr. would have wanted his father to know that he seized the initiative. The chance that Don Jr. did not walk these Jumos up to his father's office on the 26th floor is 0, said an astonished and derisive Bannon, not long after the meeting was revealed. The 3 senior guys in the campaign, an incredulous Bannon went on, thought it was a good idea to meet with a foreign government inside Trump Tower in the conference room on the 25th floor, with no lawyers. They didn't have any lawyers. Even if you thought that this was not treasonous or unpatriotic or bad shit, and I happen to think it's all of that, you should have called the FBI immediately. Even if you didn't think to do that, and you're totally amoral, and you wanted that information, you do it in a Holiday Inn in Manchester, New Hampshire, with your lawyers who meet with these people and go through everything, and then they verbally come and tell another lawyer in a cutout. And if you've got something, then you figure out how to dump it down to Breitbart or something like that, or maybe some other more legitimate publication. You never see it, you never know it because you don't need to. But that's the brain trust that they had. All of the participants would ultimately plead that the meeting was utterly inconsequential, whatever the hope for it might have been, and admit that it was hapless. But even if that was true, A year later, the revelation of the meeting had 3 profound and probably transformational effects. First, the constant, ever-repeated denials about there having been no discussion between campaign officials and the Russians connected to the Kremlin about the campaign, and indeed no meaningful contact between campaign officials and the Russian government, were exploded. Second, the certainty among the White House staff that Trump himself would have not only been apprised of the details of this meeting, but have met the principals, meant that the president was caught out as a liar by those whose trust he most needed. It was another inflection point between hunkered down in the bunker and signed on for the wild ride and get me out of here. Third, it was now starkly clear that everyone's interests diverged. The fortunes of Don Jr., Paul Manafort, and Jared Kushner hung individually in the balance. Indeed, the best guess by many in the West Wing was that the details of the meeting had been leaked by the Kushner side, thus sacrificing Don Jr. in an attempt to deflect responsibility away from themselves.